It's just gone 8 minutes past 8 now. You're listening to Good Morning Scotland. A fudge and a farce. That's how the Brexit campaign group Leave.EU described the Prime Minister's draft deal to reshape the UK's relationship with the European Union. But David Cameron was adamant that he'd secured a good outcome for this country.
Are we going to be in a more competitive Europe that helps us create jobs? Yes. And are we taking the pressure off our immigration system through these welfare changes? Yes, I think we are. And sometimes people say to me, if you weren't in the European Union, would you opt to join the European Union? And today I can give a very clear answer. If I could get these terms for British membership, I sure would opt in.
Well, the proposals will come in for further scrutiny today when MPs at Westminster and MEPs in the European Parliament get their chance to debate the deal. So will the rest of the European Union accept the reforms, and will they be enough to convince the British people to vote to stay in the EU? Well, let's speak to the former Liberal Democrat leader, Lord Campbell of Pittenweem, who's the president of the European Movement in Scotland, and Jack Montgomery, who's the Scottish spokesperson for the Leave.EU campaign group. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Ming Campbell, first of all, it was felt at the beginning of this process that David Cameron really wasn't asking for very much. And now, from this document, seems that what he was asking for has been watered down. Can he really say this is a victory?
Well, I'd prefer to echo the words of Theresa May, who was thought to be very sceptical about all of this, who's quoted as saying there's the basis for a deal. And I think that's the best way to approach this. I'm not surprised that it's being described as a farce by those who want out in all circumstances. Remember, there's something sort of disingenuous about a line-by-line dissection of what's being proposed when you know that those who are making it would want to come out whatever David Cameron had achieved. There's the basis for a deal. The door has been open, and cutting red tape, improving the market, safeguarding the interests of those countries which are not members of the single currency, the United Kingdom making it clear that it's not in favour of ever closer union, and of course the benefits, and in particular bringing an end to the notion that you can work in this country, but if you've got children in Poland or Hungary, then you can use the benefits we pay for children by passing them back to your home country.
Well, it doesn't bring an end to it, does it? What it does is, if this emergency brake is applied, it might actually put an end to it for a year or two, but after the brake is released, then ultimately we go back to the normal situation.
Well, it depends on how long the brake's in position, and it depends also on the circumstances. Would I like that particular part of the agreement to be stronger? Yes, I would. But what one's got to remember, and it's often forgotten, is that you're dealing with 27 other countries who've got a national interest as well. And in particular, in the case of Angela Merkel, who might have been thought to be particularly sympathetic to David Cameron, she's under a great deal of pressure at home because in her own party and indeed outside, there's a lot of anxiety about the attitude which she originally expressed in relation to the number of immigrants which could enter Germany. She's in a rather weak position, and if you're in a weak position, then you're not in a position to make the kind of concessions that would satisfy the Daily Mail, although I doubt that Mrs Merkel could make any concession which would satisfy the Daily Mail.
Well, Jack Montgomery, the view from Theresa May seems to be that a deal can be done. Does this go far enough to satisfy you?
No, I mean, there's just such an enormous gulf between not only what was promised, which was not very much, but what we would have liked to have seen. Mr Cameron was talking about having an emergency brake on migrant benefits. We were told actually he might exceed our expectations and get an emergency brake on benefits entirely. What he's got is an emergency brake on benefits, which we need the permission of Brussels to pull, and which can be taken away at any time. And that it doesn't even get into the fact that we will continue to have EU law standing over national law. We'll continue to have no independent vote on important global bodies like the WTO. We still won't be allowed to make bilateral free trade deals and what have you on our own initiative.
But on the EU law, he says we'll have a red card that we can waive along with other countries to say no.
We won't have a red card. We'll be able to combine with other national parliaments to issue a red card. We already have that at the governmental level in the European Council, and we've failed to exercise it in I think over 50 times of trying. We're in a minority more often than any other EU member state on voting matters in the European Council. And there's clips of William Hague in Parliament, flanked by George Osborne and Mr Cameron, laughing at the idea of this parliamentary red card.
This is in 2008.
Yes, he would only exercise it in a situation where the governments of Europe said no to you, but then you somehow got the parliaments that put those governments into the European Council to disagree with them all.
Well, let me put those points to Ming
let's-
Campbell, because the red card issue, as has been pointed out there by Jack Montgomery, was laughed at by William Hague in 2008. The idea of an emergency break, David Cameron was deriding that as recently as 2014.
Well, this is the William Hague who went to the country when he was leader of the Conservative Party, saying there was 24 hours to save the pound, a prediction which, of course, proved entirely unfounded. So I think one has to take what William Hague says about Europe, indeed what he said about it in the past, with a certain amount of circumspection. But can I pick up one of the points that was made a moment or two ago, because it's got a direct reference to Scotland, the World Trade Organization. Because we go to the World Trade Organization with 28 countries, then we have a much greater degree of influence than we would have on our own. There's a very practical Scottish illustration of this. At one stage, believe it or not, the United States was imposing tariffs and restrictions on the import of cashmere from Scotland, cashmere goods from Scotland, on a rather flimsy basis about the fact that the United Kingdom was taking a particular attitude towards the import of bananas from former Commonwealth countries. And what happened? We got a victory, and the reason we got a victory and the jobs of people working in the mills and the borders were safeguarded was because we had the full strength of the European Union behind us.
If I may
Strength in
say
numbers,
so,
Jack Montgomery?
having the full strength of the European Union behind you is only works when you have all 28 member states in agreement, as Lord Campbell's already pointed out, is very difficult. We would have had free trade deals with our old partners in countries like Australia, Canada and India long ago.
We can have these now. I mean, one of the arguments for those who want to come out is to say that we will do more trade with the Commonwealth and the United States. We can do all of these things now. There's no bar on that.
We can't do them on our own initiative. We can't just decide we'd like to make a free trade deal with the Australians. We have to get everyone to get around the table at the European level and agree to it. And if it doesn't suit French farmers or German car manufacturers, it won't happen. That's why it hasn't happened for 40 years. You can't possibly suggest that we still wouldn't have free trade deals with a country like Australia by 2016, were it not for the European Union getting in the way of that.
Can I just ask you both about your view on the timing of the referendum? The view seems to be now that because this deal has been tabled and will be discussed in the next couple of weeks, that June is a possibility. Lord Campbell, Alex Salmond says that if that happens, it would be disrespectful in terms of its proximity to the parliamentary elections in Scotland and elsewhere in the UK. Is he right?
Well, I'm not sure what's meant by disrespectful, but what I am certain about is the continuing uncertainty with the referendum hanging over this particular issue is extremely bad for confidence in the United Kingdom and its economy, and indeed for its influence within the European Union, just as it was of no particular assistance to Scotland to have a long run-in on the referendum on independence. Well, this is an issue of some urgency. Let's get it resolved as soon as we possibly can.
What's your view on the timing, Jack Montgomery?
I think it's very telling that people who are strong supporters of the European Union, like Lord Campbell, want to get this out of the way as soon as possible. They don't want people looking at it too closely. And I'm sympathetic.
So does a longer campaign suit your side of things?
We're ready to go whenever Mr Cameron decides to call it. I am sympathetic to the view that it would possibly overtake the elections to the devolved assemblies, and I'm sympathetic to the idea that we should really stick to the Electoral Commission guidelines. If Cameron can get away with holding it early, I think he will, because he doesn't want to see the European Union stumbling into its next inevitable crisis.
Okay,
does anyone think that the next elections to the Scottish Parliament will not be considering the issue of membership of the European Union and the possibility of another referendum on independence? These issues will be right at the very heart of what is being discussed in Scotland when it comes to elections.
Whatever the timing of this, we will have time to come back to you and to hear the views of many others as well ahead of that in-out referendum. But thank you very much indeed, Lord Campbell of Pittenweem, and also Jack Montgomery. It's 8:17.
Now,